The Holy Gospel according to Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We are able." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. Perhaps you've seen the news stories that have been running late about the TikTok challenge, encouraging kids to record a video of themselves engaged in some form of destructive behavior at their school and then post it on TikTok. A radio show suggested that it was an outlet for the angst that it had accumulated from a year and a half of living through the stress of a global health pandemic. Another TV news story I saw, 2 teenage girls were asked what they thought the motivation was for kids who did this. And they both agreed it was to get attention. Maybe both these news stories are right. Maybe the stresses of life increase our need to be noticed, and this behavior will get one noticed. Well, James and John also seem to be after notoriety in today's gospel. And they went about it in an underhanded sort of way. It's quite comical. They're like conniving little children wanting the assurance of a yes even before they make their request. But before we get too hard on them, let's recognize how we're a lot like them. It's a human instinct to want the best seat in the house, the biggest piece of cake, or 15 minutes of fame. Martin Luther King Jr. called it the drum major instinct. He said, "We all have this drum major instinct. We want to be important, to surpass others, to achieve distinction, to lead the parade." King also noted that Alfred Adler, the great psychoanalyst, contends that this is our dominant impulse. Freud proposed that sex was our dominant impulse, but Adler came up with a new argument saying that this quest for recognition, this desire for attention and distinction is the basic human impulse, the basic drive, this drum major instinct. And this impulse isn't just seen in James and John, but also evident in the anger of the rest of those disciples. What makes those two think that they can get ahead of us in obtaining choice places of honor? I find it's always helpful to consider the context when we're looking at a biblical passage. And I think zooming out gives us some insight into why James and John make their request of Jesus at this particular time. Looking at the bigger picture provides some possible motivation driving them to seek these coveted positions of sitting at Jesus' right and left in his glory. For just a chapter ago in Mark's narrative, they saw Jesus transfigured in glory on that mountain, conversing with Elijah and Moses. This vision might have started their drum major instinct daydreaming about future glory. Also, perhaps their dreaming and scheming was a way to avoid thinking about what Jesus had just shared with the group prior to their request. In the verses prior to today's gospel, Mark includes the third of his passion predictions, saying, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death. They will hand him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him and spit upon him and flog him and kill him. And after 3 days, he will rise again." Well, perhaps to avoid thinking about Jesus' suffering, torture, and death, their thoughts turned to glory instead. And they wanted to secure their future place in that glory. They wanted some assurance. They wanted a sense of security to stem the tide of their rising fear and anxiety. Well, notice that Jesus doesn't scold them. He doesn't scold the other disciples for getting angry at James and John. Instead, he invites them all to follow him in embracing the reality of suffering. He invites them to enter into a whole new way of seeing and living. He invites them into the way of the cross. He says, "Are you able to drink the cup? Are you able to be baptized with my baptism?" Today, we're all invited to drink the cup that transforms us into being the body of Christ. And I'll say more about how we might go about this in a moment. But first, back to James and John. I wonder if they had any idea of what they were saying yes to. Jesus tells them he can't grant their request. And all four of our Gospels record that at his crucifixion, there were two others on his right and on his left, nailed to their own crosses. I don't imagine these were the right and left places of honor that James and John had in mind. Jesus uses their audacious request as a teaching moment. Jesus recognized that drum major instinct at work, not only in these two, but in the others' anger as well. He didn't attempt to eradicate it, but rather sought to redirect it. Whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first must be slave of all. It's on that road to Jerusalem that disciples were taught how to give their lives away for the sake of the world. It's here that we drink deep of the cup of salvation and daily live out the dying and rising of our own baptisms. It's on this road to Jerusalem in wonder and fear that Jesus teaches us to go the other way. He doesn't eliminate our drum major instinct, but redirects it in joining him in overturning how the world's domination system usually works. You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and the great ones are tyrants over them, but it shall not be so among you. Molly gives us a glimpse of how to go about this. One Friday morning at the beginning of her senior year in high school, she attended a football pep rally in the gym along with thousands of other Texas high school teens. And at one point, the cheerleaders started their weekly skit about how the Dragons were going to defeat their opponent that night. Several kids came in dressed in the school colors of the opposing team. The cheerleaders went behind each of the opposition kids, tied that kid's hands behind her back, and had her kneel down on the floor. Then the cheerleaders took out toy pistols and acted out walking behind the kids and executing them. When the cheerleaders dragged the mock executed kids to a pile and threw money up in the air, the crowd of students, teachers, and parents all hollered and screamed and clapped their approval. Well, Molly went home upset and told her mom, who became upset too and sent a concerned email to the high school principal. Then she and Molly went to see the principal, who dismissed their concerns by saying, well, you and your daughter are the only ones complaining. No one else thinks anything was wrong with the skit. Well, Molly turned red in the face, and then she went to work. She rounded up 4 or 5 friends and circulated a petition in the school against the use of guns, even toy guns, in the pep rallies. Molly discovered clear language in the official handbook prohibiting guns, even toy guns, on the school grounds. Then she and another girl wrote a column in the school newspaper, but the principal censored that column because it questioned the cheerleader sponsors as well as the school administration for giving the go-ahead for the skit. The principal continued to say it was all much ado about nothing. But then a local newspaper ran the story on the front page. And by the next day, national news services were calling Molly, asking for interviews. The very next week, the school administration issued an apology on the front page of the paper, saying that the administrators were wrong and that Molly and the others had done the right thing in raising this issue. They said it would not happen again. Molly's faith gave her courage to confront a culture of violence. It's not easy to challenge the ways of the world that needs changing, yet that's what we're all, as followers of Jesus, called to do. How might you be called to challenge white supremacy, slave labor wages, or inequity in healthcare and education? How might your drum major instinct be redirected in serving others? As Martin Luther wrote in The Freedom of a Christian is a perfectly free Lord of all, subject to none. A Christian is a perfectly dutiful servant of all, subject to all. It can be as simple as an email to a friend offering a listening ear, or a card sent in thanksgiving or affirmation for someone who needs a lift. Parents have countless ways to serve the children they've been entrusted to love and care for and challenge. And children often thrive when given opportunities to serve others and may even lead in causes where adults see too many roadblocks. Last year, when racial protests bloomed around the country, I joined with some Black faith leaders in Lexington for a press conference sharing a list of needed changes in our community, like eliminating no-knock warrants, more public oversight of policing, and increased economic support of Black-owned businesses. At the conclusion of the press conference, we marched together downtown to hand-deliver the list to the mayor, the sheriff, and the police chief. And after this group of close to 100 clergy had walked a few blocks, a police cruiser pulled up beside us and then asked the leaders that were in front of us for the march 2 questions that revealed to me his servant heart. He asked, "Where are you going? And what can I do to help?" When he heard that we were going to the mayor's office, he volunteered to drive ahead and stop traffic on the cross streets to get us there safely. But those 2 questions are great questions for all who to seek to follow Jesus in this life of servanthood. Where are you going? Gives agency to the other and doesn't presume to know in advance what's best for them. And what can I do for you? Allows the other to dictate if and how they may need assistance. And then one can decide whether or not they can provide what is needed. Dignity and agency are important ingredients for our serving. We don't want to fall back into the I know what's best for you, up-down domination game. To be a servant of Christ is to drink the cup and to follow in the way of the cross. Yeah, I told you I'd get back to the cup. So how do we drink this cup? In his short work, Can You Drink the Cup?, the Dutch priest and renowned spiritual teacher Henry Nouwen asserts that we must first hold the cup. It's a cup of both suffering and joy. Together, they both fill our cup just as much as Jesus' suffering, death, and joyful resurrection fill his. We lift the cup in grateful toast to the life we've been given to live, and with gratitude for the gift of companions on our journey. Then we drink the cup. Nouwen says, we have to drink our cup slowly, tasting every mouthful all the way to the bottom. And he explores how we drink it with 3 disciplines: the discipline of silence, the discipline of word, and the discipline of action. The discipline of silence moves us away from the constant bombardment of entertainment around us, allowing us to discover and embrace both those joys and sorrows of our lives. The discipline of word is when we share these joys and sorrows with a trusted group of companions. And the discipline of action includes learning to say no to busyness in order to fulfill our true vocation, the intersection of our great passion with the world's great need. So with these 3 disciplines, we drink the cup and discover the mystery of living in Christ and Christ in us. In this way, drinking the cup redirects our drum major instinct into a new way of living and being. With Christ, we seek to upend the oppressive domination systems of our world. We embrace the reality of our lives in all their joy and their sorrow. And we learn together that the way of true greatness is the way of the cross and becoming servants of all. And I believe that's something worth getting noticed for.